Like, people think boundaries are about learning how to say no. And okay, yeah, that's a minute portion of it. But what do you say no to? And then also, how do you stand firm in your no? Because the feelings that come up when you do set limits are the main reason that people either cave on boundaries or don't set them at all.
Barb Nangle knows what it's like to live without boundaries, not as a concept, but as a daily reality. As a former addict and self-described people-pleasing rescuer, she spent years saying yes when she meant to say no, keeping secrets, and putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. That changed in 2015 when Barb entered 12-step recovery at 52. What she found there went beyond sobriety. She began to understand why she'd spent decades managing her pain through hiding, pleasing, and performing, and how the absence of healthy limits had quietly shaped every relationship in her life. Today, Barb is a boundaries coach, speaker, and the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. Her specialty is working with women who give everything to everyone around them and have nothing left for themselves. If you've ever wondered how poor boundaries contributed to the infidelity in your relationships, whether you were the one who strayed or the one who was betrayed, Barb's story and her work have something important to say to you.
Welcome to The Recovery Room, a podcast presented by affairhealing.com.
In this healing place, in this healing place.
For 20 years, Barb Nangle kept a secret. Actually, she kept several. She worked hard to please the people around her, but privately, she was living a double life. Infidelity. A secret smoking habit she hid from everyone who knew her. These weren't random choices. They were patterns she had watched growing up, behaviors that quietly became her own. It wasn't until Barb found herself in a 12-step program that something shifted. She began to see her life more clearly, the patterns, the people-pleasing, the secrets, and for the first time, started to understand what healthy boundaries actually look like. Maybe you'll find a lot of yourself in Barb's story. Here's my conversation with Barb Nangle.
Boundaries is essentially, it's many things, but including we stop putting up with shitty behavior from other people and we stop engaging in shitty behavior. And that's really what it taught me. Like, my mom, at one point, my parents got separated my entire sophomore year of high school, and then they got back together again, and then they got separated and divorced after my senior year. And the only hint my mother gave to what was going on was, your father made promises he couldn't keep. Now, I knew exactly what she meant, but we never talked about it, right? My mom was like super codependent, and that's like my core wound. So for me, I was learning like what not to put up with. And then also really cleaning up my own behavior, because a huge part of building boundaries is about coming into integrity with yourself, being an honest person of integrity, which I thought I was before, but I so wasn't. Like, I thought I was an honest person when I got in recovery, and I'm like, oh my God. I lied about cigarettes. I lied about drugs. I lied about alcohol. I lied about relationships. And I mostly lied in the people-pleasing department. But I was so not honest at all. And I would say, when I was starting to understand all that, I was like, well, at least I was in integrity with other people. No, I wasn't. I was lying to them. And that's one of the things when my brother and I reconciled, we both admitted we've been lying our way through our lives to each other and everybody else. And we made we're still making amends to each other and really processing a lot of stuff. It's amazing. The lesson is that we stop putting up with shitty behavior from other people, and we stop engaging in shitty behavior, because we want to live a life of integrity. And integrity is another word for wholeness. We want to be whole.
You tie this idea of boundaries with integrity. I think a lot of people, when they think of setting boundaries, they simply see that as creating separation between ourselves and someone who's bad or dangerous. That's not how you define it, right?
Not at all. To me, what it's really about, and this is an insight I've had in last year, it's really about creating a sense of internal safety. so that you can withstand the vicissitudes of life. So what that means is you can handle when other people are upset with you. You can handle when you set a boundary with someone and they push back. You can handle when you do something that you're not particularly proud of. And instead of raking yourself over the coals, you have your own back, you clean up your side of the street, you tell the truth, you admit that you're wrong, and you stop doing the thing. And you're right. Like the stereotype about boundaries is that they're walls that keep you from people. And here's the reality. If you're in an abusive relationship and you get a restraining order, that's a wall, and you need it because you need a wall from violence. But the vast majority of boundaries are so that you can actually become closer to people, so that you can tell them the truth about what's okay and not okay. And they can either act accordingly or you have some kind of consequence to your boundary. Like some people kick people out of their lives. Some people just minimize the amount of exposure they have to people. They don't see them as often. They see them for short periods of time. They don't invite them to their home, but they meet them out in public. So there's a natural sort of end to the event or something like that. But no, it's not. Like less than 1% of boundary setting is about keeping bad people away. But when you're surrounded with bad people, you think that's all it is.
Yeah. You mentioned that people pleasing was one of the qualities that developed in you. Mm-hmm. And I assume that stands in contrast to what someone with healthy boundaries, how they operate through life.
Right.
Talk about that difference between someone who's a people pleaser and someone who has healthy boundaries.
Yeah. So I'll talk about me specifically. Okay. So I think of myself as having been a volunteeraholic before I got into recovery. I volunteered for some like 13 different nonprofit organizations. And then, of course, I got the reputation of being a yes woman. And I said yes to things all the time because I didn't want to be a bad person. Well, now that I'm in recovery and I have healthy boundaries, I actually donate more hours per week to community service than I ever did before, but I do it strategically rather than at the drop of a hat. I do it by choice, not out of a sense of obligation or compulsion. And I do it after filling my cup first. Rather than trying to pour from an empty cup, I've learned I get to pour from the overflow. And the only way I can have an overflow is if I fill my cup first. So the contrast is a people pleaser feels compelled to do it. It's a compulsion for them, or they feel this sense of obligation. Like if I don't do it, then who does? Or what are they going to think of me if I don't? They do it on a whim. There's no plan. They just are constantly saying yes. They don't think about like, do I have the energy? Do I have the bandwidth? Is this in alignment with my values? Is this a cause that I really want to participate in? Is this a person who's going to reciprocate for me? Is this a person who's going to appreciate me? So that I'm not constantly drained and therefore resentful. So it's a huge difference from helping versus rescuing or people pleasing. I know that before recovery, and I didn't know I was a people pleaser before I understood all this. I truly thought, well, I'm a nice person. That's why I help people. Like I remember specifically at least once saying to someone, I'm nice. That's why I do that. So I thought I was nice. And the idea that I was a people pleaser or that I was an approval seeker was like, what? And the way that this came to my consciousness was I went to this woman in Codependence Anonymous. That was my first recovery program. I was only in it for a year. And I said to her, I'm starting to see there's like this continuum of helpfulness where on one end we've got like kindly, helpful, functional, healthy, helpful behavior, right? And on the other end, we've got this like dysfunctional, rescuing, fixing, saving, enabling, codependent behavior. And I'm starting to get some clarity on the difference between the two ends of the continuum. It's in that middle part that's really confusing to me. Like, where do you flip over from being rescuing to being just regular helpful? And she said, Barb, it really depends. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you want to be truly helpful or so they'll like you? And I was like, I'm totally doing it to be helpful.
Of course.
And then, Tim, that question percolated and I was like, oh, I started watching my behavior and I was like, oh my God, this is really, and it's not that I want them to like me necessarily. I want them to think good things of me. Like, I do not want them to think I'm a bad person. And to me, a bad person says no and is unhelpful. Then, as I started to understand that I was a people pleaser and that people pleasing is dishonest because we're saying yes to things we don't want to do, we act like things are okay that they're not. We're probably bitching about people behind their backs. And it's also manipulative because what we're doing is we are going about whatever we're doing with the goal of pleasing people, of seeking their approval. I want them to think I am a good person. And what that meant for me was I was more invested in them thinking I was a good person than I was in being a good person. And the way I know that is that if I really just wanted to be a good person, then I would stop at the point where I became resentful and was bitching and complaining about people. And when you think about it, like, I didn't want to be a bad person, but if you made a list of qualities of a bad person, I'm guessing lying and manipulating would be kind of near the top, right? So here I am, not wanting to be perceived as a bad person, but I'm acting as a bad person. And mind you, this is all subconscious. I did not know any of this was going on. And I had been in therapy for 37 almost continuous years before I got in recovery. I started reading self-help books voraciously starting at age 22. I did workshops and seminars and spiritual groups and support groups, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff kind of like scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, and 12-step recovery like melted the iceberg. And I came to see myself in ways that I just didn't previously. And so I came to understand I wasn't an honest person. I was not living in integrity. I was manipulating people, and I just don't anymore. So I want people to like me, Tim. I don't, with claws, like need them to like me the way that I used to. It's fine to seek others' approval, but only if you have your own approval first. There's two questions in particular that I ask myself when I'm trying to decide, is this a healthy behavior for me, or is this the quote right boundary for me? And it's, what are my motives? Why am I doing this thing? Am I doing it because I truly want to be helpful? Am I doing it because I feel like I have something to contribute? Am I doing it because this is a cause that I care about? Am I doing this because I want people to think good things of me? And then the second question is, does this serve my highest good? And one of the ways that I measure that, and I do it with my clients, is I have my clients, before we start coaching, they go through an exercise to determine their top 5 values. So if something serves my highest good, that means it will be in alignment with my top values. If my motives are not pure, then that's not the right decision or the right boundary for me. And if the thing brings me out of alignment with my higher good, my higher self, my values, it's not the right decision, or it's not the right boundary for me.
Let's think about how the issues of boundaries might come to play when it comes to relationships, and especially relationships that have been affected by infidelity. Can you think of ways that a marriage or a relationship with poor boundaries might be more vulnerable to broken trust or infidelity?
For sure, because chances are very high that the cheating person, like, there's something going on in the relationship that is not okay with them, and they're going outside of the relationship to get what they want instead of speaking directly to their partner and saying, this isn't working for me. When we have healthy boundaries, we tell the truth. This is not working for me, or this is okay with me, this is not okay with me. Chances are high the person being cheated on is having a similar experience, maybe in a different way, but there's probably things going on for them that are not okay with them. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet, I am in the first and only healthy relationship I've ever had in my life. I was 55 and he was 60 when we met. We've been together for over 7 years. And if I were to boil down the essence of what is different for me and for him too in this relationship, it's that as soon as something bothers us, we say something. We do not let it fester. We also own our shit. We apologize. We own it when we make mistakes. When one of us brings something about the other, we're like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that that was a problem for you. We don't get defensive. We don't like blame the other person. We're not constantly complaining about, like, if I have complaints about him, he's the person that I tell.
Yeah. This owning it, this being willing to apologize, this being authentic, you're connecting all of this to healthy boundaries. And I don't think normally people equate those things as being
No.
related.
They don't. This is what makes my job so hard, is I have to, I don't have to, I get to help people understand that's a boundary issue, that's a boundary issue, that's a boundary issue. And the reality is, when you clean up your boundaries in your life, it cleans up so much stuff. And I think for me personally, Tim, the boundaries that had by far the greatest impact are what I call boundaries of self-containment. So these are things I either needed to contain or stop doing entirely. And I would say, you can't put math to this stuff, but I would say something like 85% of the drama and chaos of my life got cleaned up when I implemented boundaries of self-containment, when I stopped doing stuff. I was almost like I was like lobbing bombs into my own life, but thinking they were coming from elsewhere.
I'd imagine that post-infidelity, the person who's been betrayed, if they're in relationship with someone who is still acting out, who isn't fully committed to restoring the relationship or reestablishing trust, we would define their boundaries as one that that's not a safe person for you. You're establishing those kind of boundaries. But let's consider the couple that have agreed that they want to try to heal from this, learn from it, and build a relationship that is secure and satisfying to both of them. What would the place of boundaries be to that betrayed partner?
Nobody can tell you what your boundaries are. You get to decide that. And part of it is because you're you, and you were the only one that knows what's okay with you and not okay with you. But another part of it is, let's say you were my client, Tim, and I said to you, Tim, these should be your boundaries, and you listened to me. Then you're not taking responsibility for your own life and your own boundaries, and you get to blame me if things don't work out that way. That's not mature adult behavior. That's not emotionally mature behavior. And learning how to build healthy boundaries is also about being a mature person, and like telling the truth and having difficult conversations. Like, I thought that I was a good communicator, but the fact that I was like lying and manipulating people all the time in every area of my life, not a good communicator. I did a lot of like beating around the bush, implying things, expecting people should know things. I subconsciously wanted people to read my mind. Even when they said to me, I can't read your mind, I would say, I don't expect you to. And at the time I meant it. Now I can look back and go, oh, I had this deep-seated belief that if they loved me enough, they would figure it out. And then I tried to read other people's minds. Instead of saying, what did you mean by that? Or I'm not sure where you're going with this, I would just fill in the blanks. And when I filled in the blanks, it was always, I'm the victim somehow, and you're doing something to me. And we don't do that when we have healthy boundaries. And it's a process. So like, people think boundaries are about learning how to say no. And okay, yeah, that's a minute portion of it. But what do you say no to? And then also, how do you stand firm in your no? Because the feelings that come up when you do set limits are the main reason that people either cave on boundaries or don't set them at all. That's that internal safety that I was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think of relationship boundaries as what any couple defines as what they expect to say no to, but also what they expect to say yes to. I mean, what are the things that we expect from each other and with each other within the relationship? And then what do we agree we leave outside of the relationship too? And again, each couple has to define that for themselves. I want to go back to that person that was betrayed. When I bring up boundaries to a betrayed partner, I think the idea that pops into their head is, yes, boundaries. They're important right now. My partner needs to establish them. No, in fact, I need to help them establish those boundaries, and I'm going to take responsibility for telling them exactly what they need to do and actually what they shouldn't do, and I'm going to be checking in constantly to make sure that those boundaries are firm and in place. And I think that's problematic because that person starts being responsible for establishing trust. And it sounds like the opposite of what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're talking about boundaries being authentic. It's being honest. So according to your definition, would a healthier boundary be for that person be someone who is very clear in articulating what they need to feel satisfied and safe in a relationship, and to be very clear about that, and then to make the decisions for themselves based on whether they're with someone that is respecting those and honoring those, but not trying to step in and make that happen for the other person?
So what I'm hearing you saying in my language is, what you were first talking about is the partner who's been betrayed wants to control the other person. That's what a lot of people think boundaries. If I have healthy boundaries, I will control other people. You can't control other people. This is why the serenity prayer is such an incredibly popular prayer. Like, we get to accept the things we cannot change, people, places, and things. And we might need courage to change the things we can, ourselves, our thoughts, our behaviors, our patterns, that sort of thing. And the wisdom to know the difference, that's kind of the hardest part of all. Like, can I change this? Can I not change this? So rather than controlling your partner, which you cannot do, you say, these are my boundaries. And if you violate them, here's what I will do. Because real boundaries have consequences. So if you set a boundary with anybody and they don't honor it and you do nothing, it wasn't a boundary. I call it a hope or a wish. You're hoping they'll listen to you. You're wishing that they would change. But a boundary has consequences. Like, the classic codependent is in a relationship with an alcoholic. You can say to your partner, you can't drink, but you can't stop them from drinking. What you can say is, if you drink, I will be leaving. If you drink, I will no longer give you money for rent. If you drink, you can no longer drive the car. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so it's not, you can do whatever you want, but if you do, then here's the consequence. So in the context of a relationship with infidelity, like, clearly if you cheat, that would be the thing, but there's got to be behaviors leading up to that. There have to be like trust building behaviors. Like, if you don't follow through on whatever these trust building behaviors are, I'm going to take that as a sign you're not as committed, or like, those are the signs that tell me that you're committed. And maybe they don't mean that to you, but that's what I need to stay in this relationship. And if you can't give this to me, then you're not the partner for me.
I have many, many spouses and partners that come to me after being betrayed that will tell me, I can't believe I'm even here, because my commitment was, if my spouse ever cheats on me, I'm out. I'm gone. They established a boundary, and now they find themselves wanting to negotiate that. I give grace there because I know that they were setting a boundary not based on necessarily personal experience of having been betrayed, but just what they imagined that would be. And by the way, they have every right to say, I'm done, I'm out of here, and they can do that.
Exactly.
But if they're sitting there saying, maybe if they're serious about changing, I'm willing to give this another try. Okay, that's grace. You can do that. However, once a couple has gone through that process, that the person who betrayed is, saying, I'm telling you the whole truth about it, and my commitment is to reestablish trust. That's my responsibility. I'm going to do it. If that person breaks trust again, I'm a pretty strong believer on, you should have already communicated to them, I'm willing to work through this. But if you do this again, I'm not going to keep doing this, because I rarely see a couple being able to make their way back after a second subsequent betrayal, once the first one's worked through. So I think the first one is a boundary, but it's a little bit unexperienced.
Yeah.
So
or
if they decide,
maybe. Yeah. Because it doesn't include the emotional connection and the longevity of the relationship and everything that you've built together, especially if you've been married for a long time and you have children and you own a home and you built a life and all that stuff. Like, you can't before that happens, you can't weigh emotionally what that's going to mean to you. So it's a lot easier to abstractly say, oh, he's out of there if he cheats on me, or she's out of there if she cheats on me. It's different when you have this whole life together, to make that decision. So yeah, people get to decide for themselves. Am I willing to stay and try, or do I need to bye-bye? And there's no right decision. There's only your right decision. And you can also change your mind.
How can healthy boundaries help establish or rebuild trust in a relationship that's been broken by infidelity?
The frankness about, this is what matters to me. This is what's okay. This is what's not okay, from both parties, not just the person who has been betrayed. And also being honest. Like, as time goes on and you're both of you putting in this effort in, if it feels like this is really working and this is going great for both of you, excellent. But if for one of you, or especially both of you, if it's like, this is way too hard, or these standards are too high for me, or whatever it is, be honest sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And I cannot imagine a couple coming back from this without getting outside help. I can't. I just can't imagine how that could possibly work. And I mean professional help, like a coach or a therapist or something, not just your mother whose husband cheated on her kind of thing, or your friends or whatever. Because you need a relatively objective party that is not loyal to either one of the two people, but is loyal to the idea of couplehood for them in a way that works for both of them. So there has to be really direct communication, direct and clear. So none of this beating around the bush, or, hoping people will figure out what you're saying, or, reading between the lines, or any of that stuff. You have to be willing to say, I'm not quite sure what that means. Can you help me understand that? Or, that's not really what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say was this. Or, here's what I think. It would be really helpful to me if you could repeat back what you just heard me say, so that it's really clear we're both on the same page. And I know that it's painstaking to talk like this, but it's imperative if we're going to build a broken bridge back up out of the shambles of what we have here right now.
Barb, if someone wanted to find out more about you, the services you provide, where should they go?
So if they're a podcast listener, which I'm assuming they are, they can hop on over to Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, and then links to all my stuff is always in my show notes. I have tons of free stuff on my website. It's higherpowerscc.com, which stands for Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. And then if they heard this and they think that they might seriously want to do coaching with me, they can go to barbchat.net. And that's a link to my calendar for, I call it a Say No Without Guilt call. It's 30 minutes, sometimes 45, but it's where, they're going to give me some information. We're going to talk together to see, what are their issues? Is there a way that I can help them get from where they are to where they want to be? And if so, what might that be?
You can schedule that free call with Barb by going to barbchat.net, and links to more of her resources are included in the episode notes, so be sure to check them out. Thank you for listening.